Funny thing is that it's the homeowners who made that analogy about it's not just us, it's any owner of that parcel would have that same right.
That's a great, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll say that, Peter, that would just be a fabulous thing.
But good on them for being
Right.
good partners and, you know, really sharing.
Yeah.
Wait, are these really? For real? Yeah, I brought them so people, if they want to take them. I thought I'd grab more, but I did not, obviously, so yeah, take them. We got tons, I'll bring more than for your office?
I would love one. Do you
Oh,
have
yeah,
any
I'll
more?
bring more. I
would
grabbed
love
like what was on my table. No.
I have one.
I would love one for my office.
I don't have an office.
Yeah.
One for the city, yeah, and one for the.
Oh, well, where did Peter find them? Were they
on
back
the
there?
table
He already
Oh,
dropped, I
thank
think,
you.
Ben and Tommy.
You
dropped
sure can. I might have an extra one. You always
Oh,
have
in
such
fact,
nice-
there's a whole pile of them.
But you know, I actually bought those from
them.
Walmart because I like that pen.
Oh, I
You
see.
want like an eight? They're nice.
Very nice.
I feel
The
like
shirts
these
might have some color too, I'm pretty psyched about too.
a real ink pen. I try to keep.
Oh, yeah, not with the Mr. Speedy pants.
Oh, I like this poster. I don't want to mess it up.
No thanks.
I think we're gonna start.
Okay.
And then I'll.
So she was.
Yeah.
We need to. Okay. Do we have a quorum? Cindy, do we have a quorum, sweetheart? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're looking for 5, 6. We do. Our quorum's 6, right?
Yes,
And we have, let me just make sure, so we have.
no, 5. Our quorum's
Quorum's 5, I
5.
thought it was 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good.
I have.
I'm happy. So I'm gonna go, let's get started. So I'm gonna call the Regional Transit Partnership meeting to order.
I don't think you.
I don't know who the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, Scott,
Don't have an in-person forum yet.
No,
yeah, no, wait,
Mike, I
Yeah, we
actually am
do.
too excited, we're gonna back off here in a minute.
He's online,
Brian?
he doesn't count as a voting member until the in-person forum.
Brian, Natalie,
1, 2,
Diantha,
3.
Catano, Scott.
He doesn't count as a, no, he has to be ushered in. So,
Catano
Is Kai
is,
voting?
yeah,
so Taco is.
is
yes.
voting.
Yeah.
Scott, that's Scott, right? Yeah,
1,
Scott,
2, 3.
Brian, Diantha, and Natalie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're 5, we're good, okay. Yay! All right,
I thought when you pointed, I so apologize, I thought you were pointing to him.
no, he
That's
doesn't
where I
count.
messed up, so that's.
Mike, you don't count.
Mike, so.
I meant perception, you meant person.
We have to count so you can. The one thing I will say about this group is we try to have fun. All right, so if you want to start the recording.
It is recording.
Oh, that was good, okay. All right, I'm gonna call the meeting to order, please, and welcome everybody. Our first item of business will be to invite Mike Pruitt to join us. And Mike, could you please state your name, your location, and your reason for Zooming this morning? I'm sorry, this afternoon.
Yes, my name's Mike Pruitt. I am in Chautauqua, New York, and I'm here on personal business and therefore need to participate remotely.
Thank you. So with that, I will entertain a motion to invite Mike to join our meeting.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second by Natalie, and I think the motion was by Asher. Okay, Scott, there you go. Will you call the roll for us, please?
I'm sorry, so who made the motion?
Oh,
Scott?
Scott made the motion, and
Okay.
Natalie made the second.
Okay,
We're good. Yeah.
okay.
And if you'll call the roll
Yes.
for a vote, that'd be great.
Mr. Pinkston,
Here.
Miss Oshrin,
Yes.
Here?
We're voting to accept Mike into the meeting. Are we not confused? Okay, maybe I'm confused. Go ahead.
I'm calling the roll call vote.
She's calling.
Roll
yeah.
first and then vote? No,
We're voting to accept Mike into the meeting.
So
Okay.
everybody that's responding is saying
Saying
yay,
yes.
nay, not
Yes.
present or here.
You're not
Oh.
saying here.
Okay.
Here
You're
and
voting.
yes.
Okay,
That's what
Present
was
is,
confusing.
all right.
Yes.
Supervisor McKeel.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna call on Mr. Pruitt because he is, right. Ms. Miller is not here. Mr. Parker. Mr. De Campo Lopez.
Aye.
Mr. Sildorf,
Yes.
and, that's all.
All right, so Mike, I believe you have been accepted into the meeting. Welcome. And with that, let's do our introductions. And we'll start as we normally do and go around the table. Mike, could we start with you, even though you've already introduced yourself?
Sure. Mike Pruitt, Albemarle County Supervisor representing the Scottsville District.
Thank you. Thomas?
Hi, Gaetano de Campos Lopez, represent board member of JAUNT Urban.
Great, and welcome,
Thank you.
because you're new for us. And although we know you, but you're new for us on the
I
phone.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you.
Glad
Yes.
to be here.
Okay, yeah, Mike?
I hope that I'm welcome this morning. Mike Murphy, Jaunt.
Mike, we're always thrilled to see you.
Christine Jacobs, Cemetery.
Scott Silsdorf, Director of Parking and Transportation at UVA.
Ryan Pinkston, member of Charlottesville City Council.
Diantha McKeel, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
Natalie Oshrin, also Charlottesville City Council.
Jen Fleischer, posing as Peter Thompson for Charlottesville Area Alliance.
Peter Krebs from the Piedmont Environmental Council.
Ann Wall, Albemarle County.
Oh, Lucinda Shannon, staff.
Okay, and while we're at it, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Matthew Ray, the Amalgamated Transit Union.
Great. Welcome to have you here. Yes, and behind me?
Oh, my name is Peter Feckety. I'm an interested resident of Charlottesville.
Great, well, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, our next agenda item, approval of our agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move for approval of the agenda.
So Brian's made the motion, and is there a second? Second by Tyler, great. Would you please call the vote for the approval of the agenda?
Mr. Pinkston,
Yes.
Ms. Oshrin,
Yes.
Ms. McKeel,
Yes,
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. Parker is not here, right? Okay. Mr. Campo Lopez,
Here.
Mr. Silsdorf,
Here.
that's all.
all right, so we have an agenda. Next item are our draft meeting minutes from June the 27th, because of course we did not meet in July. So the last set of minutes is from June, and I have a correction that I want to point out. If you look at the minutes on the first page, Mrs. McKeel noted that this is the last meeting for Hal Morgan and that Jamie Gellner will be taking his place on the committee. That needs to be corrected to read, let me find it here. Ms. McKeel noted that this is the last meeting for Hal Morgan and that Randy Parker will be taking his place on the committee. So unless there are any other comments about the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
So motion from Brian and a second from Natalie. And could you call the vote for us, please?
Mr. Pinkston,
Yes.
Ms. Oshrin,
Yes.
Ms. McKeel,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Mr. De Campo Lopez,
Aye.
Mr. Silsdorf.
Yes.
Great, thank you. We're making progress here. Our next item is election of officers. We were really, we must admit, we were supposed to do this in July, but we didn't have a meeting in July. So it's on the agenda for today. It's a little awkward for me to be running the meeting for the election of officers, but I'm just going to simply say I'd like to see if there are any nominations from the floor.
I would move to keep the same leadership that we have now. You as chair and Ms. Austria as vice chair. Particularly, I would argue, for one reason, you've done a great job. Secondly, going into this RTA effort, I think having consistency at the top would be very helpful.
Okay, so we have a motion, and I guess I can do it as one motion. But I wanted to say we have a nomination for myself as chair and Natalie for vice chair, but I want to make sure that there are no other motions or folks that would like to toss their name into the ring. Anybody? All right, can we do that with one motion?
Yes.
I think we could, don't you? Right. So we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
A second? Hey, welcome.
Good to see you.
Glad you joined us.
Sorry I'm late. Doctor's.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Who made the motion?
So Brian made the motion.
Okay.
And we have the second from Randy. Yeah, all right. So would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pinkston?
Yes.
Ms. Oshrin?
Yes.
Ms. McKeel?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. De Campo Lopez?
Aye.
Mr. Silsdorf?
Aye.
All right, so we thank you very much. We're making progress, and Ellie and I appreciate the support. And I want to swing back because Randy just arrived. We had our introduction, but you have been a member of this committee before, and you're back for another, so introduce yourself.
I'm here as the JAUNT Borough representative. I'm on the JAUNT board, and I live in Louisa County. I'm a mostly retired attorney.
It's always nice to have an attorney. Now we have a couple of attorneys.
Yeah, and I was here at the beginning.
Yeah, you were.
For about 5 years.
Yes, you were. So I'm thrilled to have you back. I know everybody is thrilled to have you, so welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, next item on the agenda is public comment. Lucinda, do we have anybody sign up for comment from the public? I'm looking behind me to see it.
If anybody from the public would like to speak, you can raise your hand here, or you can raise your hand in the Zoom meeting. And I don't see anybody raise the computer.
Okay.
Diantha, would you rather I make an announcement now or during the updates?
Probably during the updates.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seemed more smooth, but didn't
Yeah,
want to
this is
make.
usually for the.
Great.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
That's good to know that you have some of that. That's great.
Great.
All right, so we don't have anybody from the public.
No, we do
All right.
not.
So I know we're all excited for this next agenda item. And it's like she's excited too. So we're going to be talking about the CARTA work group update. Ann is in the chambers. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. So we're getting the screen shared. And I'll let you start off, I guess, or however.
So, do you have a clicker, or do you want me to stand up there? Do you want me to stand
I
up?
can stand up here, you can.
Oh, here, why don't I stand up?
Somebody- yeah,
Here, I'll stand
That's
right
probably
here.
better, because I think we'll be able to hear you better.
I have notes pages, so bear with me. Now, I can't.
You can see right here.
Oh, okay, I can see right there.
Ann and Ben, on behalf of the county and the city, have been working hard to get this together for us. And we're pretty excited to see the report and what the recommendations are.
Thank you, Ms. McKeel.
Yes.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here to come and talk about regional transit authorities and the possibility for a regional transit authority in Charlottesville, Albemarle. I'm going to provide this presentation today, but it is important to point out that this is really the work of a committee that has worked together. That includes Ben Chambers with the City of Charlottesville, as well as Christine Jacobs and Lucinda Shannon with the TJPDC. We have met regularly since about March, about every 2 weeks, as we've talked about the value, the formation of what a regional transit authority would look like. So here's a brief agenda about what we're going to talk about, a little bit of background slides. Some of this is a bit repetitive from what we did at the last meeting, but I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed. We'll also talk a bit about the structure of a regional transit authority, a little bit of information about some of the outreach that we've done. We have some key takeaways and then a next step. And I'll preview that to the board, and what we'd ask the RTP to consider at the end is a recommendation to endorse the formation of a regional transit authority. As I go along, if you have any questions, please stop me, although I feel very comfortable saying this to this group because I think you all are very comfortable stopping me.
And I just want to remind Mike, just make sure you put up your hand, Mike, if you have a question.
And I may not see him,
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
I don't know if right now is the right time for this question, but since you mentioned that the goal is for the RTP to make a recommendation, I just wanted to ask, the recommendation is going to be sent to which decision-making body?
We'll speak about that, but it is important to point out that there is a joint city-county meeting of our two governing boards, and we are planning we believe at that meeting we'll do a presentation about a regional transit authority. So we would like to, if this group is interested in moving forward with a regional transit authority, take a vote of endorsement to that joint meeting. Great question.
So we're recommending that the city and the county pretty much.
Right, and when we get a little further along, you'll see why it has to be the city and the county together.
And I will say that the joint meeting between the city and the county is September 17th.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
believe is the date.
Okay, so just a little bit about the history. Many of you probably know this, but I'm just for the sake of putting it all in one concise place, we want to provide a little bit of information about the background. The conversation about a regional transit authority has been taking place in this area for probably 15 or more years. There's the earliest reference that we can find dates back to 2008 when a study was done called the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority Report, and that study sort of explored the formation of an authority, which was really intended to promote the development of regional transit services and to help those in the area with attractive alternatives to driving when roadways were becoming more and more congested. Fast forward to 2009. 2009 was an important moment because the General Assembly passed legislation which provided for enabling legislation for the formation of a regional transit authority. As we've talked about in the past, key legislation because it allowed us to create the authority, but what was lacking was a revenue generating clause. That legislation allowed the authority to exist, but did not provide for a means to fund the authority. In 2016, it was discussed again. There was a study done, a regional coordination study, which really looked at the question of regional transit. It was intended to really identify opportunities to improve communication, coordination, and collaboration on transit matters. The study resulted in a recommendation to form the Regional Transit Partnership, which is where we are today. It was identified in that study that the Regional Transit Partnership was intended to serve as a precursor to an authority. Two other studies to remind the board about, to remind this partnership about, is in 2022, there was a Regional Transit Vision Plan. This was a pretty important document. This document really talked about what this community anticipated, what this community desired would be the vision for transit, how transit would be provided. And they wanted to ensure that it was provided in an efficient, equitable, and effective way. It laid out a clear vision. This visioning plan also identified short-term, long-term, and extended long-term actions that the community could take to achieve this vision for transit. One of the first steps that was identified in that study was to initiate a transit governance study. And the governance study was intended to look at governance, the governance structure, as well as revenue opportunities that might exist. So then in 2024, yes, ma'am?
I'm just going to point out that these studies are on our website, I believe.
Yes.
If anyone's interested in going and taking a look.
That's exactly right. They're all on the TJPDC website. I think it's under Regional Transit Planning.
Yeah.
Great source. 2024 is probably actually 2023, 2024. The TJPDC worked with communities and stakeholders and did the transit governance study, which in the end recommended that CARTA, and we'll talk a little bit about what CARTA, but recommended that the community pursue the activating a regional transit authority. That the idea was to create an authority where we could collectively look at and address transit needs in the community, and also at some point in the future to pursue collective action on a dedicated revenue source. That study also talked about the need for the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle to be the first two partners in CARTA, which is mimicked in the legislation. The study identified some steps that would be taken. There would be a small group selected to work on developing bylaws, talking about work plans, and identifying budgets. And that's what kicked off the work that Ben and Christine and Lucinda and I have been working on since March.
And I would just add, so everybody knows, that the General Assembly determined that Charlottesville and Albemarle has to establish the authority. So we don't want anybody to think that we were excluding JAUNT or Greene County or Fluvanna or any of the surrounding areas. That is our charge from Charlottesville and Albemarle and the General Assembly to start this authority.
Yes, ma'am. The legislation is clear that the two Charlottesville and Albemarle have to come together to enact the authority. There is opportunity, and we would welcome the opportunity from participation from the 4 surrounding counties, but it has to be the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle that have to enact it.
And the University of Virginia.
Well, and the University of Virginia, we'll talk a little bit, we talked to Scott, is really becomes, and you'll see a little later on, they can be designated as a partner, but really a non-voting member of the board. And it's important to point out that all of that is grounded in, I brought a copy of it, in the legislation that had very specific language about who would be a member of the authority. All of that is laid out in the legislation. And I think it goes back to in 2008, there were a lot of these authorities being formed across the state. Much of our legislation is mimicked in some of the other places, except for the fact that the revenue portion is not in ours.
And I will say this as a comment. If you think about the economy in 2008, we were in a recession, and what happened was we had the legislation, but nobody had any money. So that was what happened, was the recession hit, and we were just sort of at a standstill. But we're back here today, so thank you, Ann.
And what we wanted to talk about is really what would be the role of an authority. I think sometimes we get a couple questions about what would be the role of authority. So what we have done is we put in 4 different buckets. There's the general bucket of that the authority could serve as this collaborative, multi-jurisdictional entity where transit problems could be addressed and solved. It would be the forum for carrying out sort of regional planning efforts and an opportunity to work through difficult decisions. Everybody's sitting around a table, rolling up their sleeves, working out issues. So a place where a regional body could help to identify transit priorities, and then provide some oversight on some of the programs that are, some of the transit as well as the congestion management mitigation programs that would exist. There's a bucket about planning. We've heard a lot about, and the transit governance studies talked a lot about planning and how important transit planning is, and that would be an important role for the transit authority, would be to prepare transit plans for all or a portion, I'm sorry, there's a little typo on my slide, in the area, long-range transit planning, and well as an opportunity to look at service expansion, and alternatives. 2 other buckets, funding, right? You can plan all the great services, but you need money to run these services. And so the transit authority could serve with identified designated revenue as a vehicle for administering, collecting dedicated revenue. It could also be an authority that would look at what funding formulas look like, right? How money is allocated. And finally, one of the most important partners, the two most important partners that we probably have related to transit are the state and federal governments. And so the transit authority could play a really important role on that regional basis. It could be an advocate for transit needs to the federal and state government. It could be, and collectively, I think that's important to point out, that the region coming together and collectively talking to the state and federal government is an important role for an authority to do. We all talk to and talk about why these services are important to our region. It could recommend transit priorities, and then finally apply for grants. Grants for service expansions to both the federal and the state government. We've talked a lot about benefits. We see as our group a number of benefits. We've listed some of them on the screen, and a lot of these are benefits related to planning efforts. I just do want to call out a couple of them. The idea that seamless connectivity, the opportunity to look across the region and across the location to figure out how we can move people where people need to go. If you look at it related to economic development, it is a tool to increase mobility, to provide linkages and access to commercial and job centers, healthcare and education. It's an opportunity to attract investment. A well-planned and well-integrated system is really attractive for those that want to provide funding. And then finally, as it relates to data, the idea of sharing data provides for improved decision-making. It helps us to understand where best to put limited resources, and we can leverage some technology to provide improved service as well as customer service. So the work that's to date, and we've shared much of this with this group before. We as a group of our work team, we've engaged with localities, with their staffs and the UVA leadership to gain an understanding of transit needs. We've engaged with the transit service providers to hear about existing plans, how they align with needs, and coordination between jurisdictions and services. We even, I think our last visit, we spent probably 2 hours, Lucinda and Ben and I spent some time with DRPT, went to Richmond and spoke with staff at DRPT to really understand what they would hope and they would see would be the value of a regional transit authority.
So they're supportive.
They're very supportive, yeah, very supportive. We have developed bylaws that are in conformance with the CARTA legislation, the legislation that created CARTA passed in 2009, and we have spent some time talking about work plans. What are the next couple of steps that an organization would need to take going forward? Yes, sir.
I have a question. As you were talking about the role of the authority, refreshing our minds regarding the studies that were developed in recent years related to this topic. I'll confess, sometimes I got confused and I refer to the RTP as Regional Transportation Partnership and its Transit Partnership. And as you were talking about all of that, I cannot have a clear understanding of in which ways this authority will engage with transportation topics other than transit or not. It's very transit period.
Yeah, and that is a great question. What we have looked at is a transit authority. When you look at other examples across the Commonwealth of Virginia, many of them are transportation authorities. The one in Richmond, the one in Northern Virginia, and they look at both transit, but transportation, big dollar, high dollar projects. What we have done with this work and much of the background that has been prepared has been related solely to transit.
So, all right, just to be clear, micromobility, bikes, walkability, even kind of cars and multimodal transportation, everything is not a part of the authority.
I would say that this is transit, microtransit related, but anything with transit in the title. Road construction, multimodal paths, capital kinds of instructions are not at this point. You're going to see later on, I'm going to share a little bit that one of the to-dos for this group, when the RTA, if the RTA is formed, one of the two to-dos may be to look at that legislation and understand are there different asks for the General Assembly and what might those be? But that's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have talked about that as a board numerous times.
So why did I?
Did you just lose your connection?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we noticed that.
Right, Wi-Fi just went out.
The transit authority, you can do pathways to transit.
Okay,
Oh, you're saying.
okay.
So there is a.
If it's transit adjacent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, just to point out, Supervisor McKeel mentioned it, there was 2009 legislation that passed that talked about the creation of the transit authority. It identified powers of what our transit authority could do. It talked about who the initial members were. The initial members were clearly specified as the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. It identified there was opportunities for the 4 surrounding counties to participate, if they chose to participate, opportunities for partners to serve as non-voting members, and it describes sort of duties and responsibilities.
So Fluvanna Green, Louisa, and Nelson, and the University of Virginia, those are the groups that you and Ben reached out to specifically.
Right, and we also met with Kat and with John as well in DRPT.
Right.
So I just wanted to quickly go through the bylaws. It's important to point this out about the bylaws. The bylaws themselves would be adopted by the Transit Authority. So, but we felt it was important to go ahead and have a draft set of bylaws. So there would be sort of a basis or a starting point. Much of this work for these bylaws is really copied and from the other transportation authorities that exist across the state. And if you did an analysis of those bylaws from those agencies, they are very much alike. And so we chose not to reinvent the wheel, right, and did a lot of copying and pasting related to our transit authority. Again, let's just talk about that. These draft bylaws identify that the initial members are the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, that Fluvanna, Green, Louisa, and Nelson, as well as private non-partners, they may join, that the board of directors would be composed of 2 members of the Albemarle County Supervisors, 2 members of the Charlottesville City Council, 1 member of the governing body of each of those jurisdictions that join. Green, Fluvanna, I should have said those in order, Fluvanna, Green, Louisa, and Nelson. It provides for up to 4 non-voting members or non-voting directors representing the interests of agencies or institutions in the region. If the University of Virginia wanted to participate, that role as a non-voting member at this point would be where the University of Virginia would participate. It could be others. The legislation, let me just read you exactly what the legislation says. It identifies 4 and it says, public transportation agencies serving such counties may join the authority, is how it defines it. The governing body, so it actually leaves it fairly wide open about who those 4 members may be, those 4 non-voting members.
For I know you mentioned that a lot of this language came from other regional transit authorities. Is that how they dealt with their local colleges as well, or is this something that we created?
You know, I'll say this. I think that some of those, the college or the university was not as large of a presence in the community, Northern Virginia, in the Tidewater area. But that language for those 4 non-voting members comes directly out of the state legislation.
So just to be clear on this topic, Anne, when the partnership was first established, our partnership, UVA was at the table but was a non-voting member. We went back and changed our bylaws, and they are now a voting member of the partnership. That could happen with the authority at some point if we chose to. I guess that's the question I'm asking.
Yes, ma'am, and the way we see that as occurring is, you'll see it relates back to this suggestion about transit versus transportation, is when the authority is created, if there is a move to explore revenue, a different makeup of partners, it would have to go back to the General Assembly for changes in the legislation, and that would be part of that legislative act.
But it could be entertained, and it would just require general.
Right, and we could provide some information for the authority when the time came to talk about the makeup of some of those other authorities around the state.
We're not gonna let you off the hook.
Well, and just, I wanted to ask a clarifying question. I think you probably said that under the role of the authority would supplant this committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
RTP and the authority obviously would not both exist at the same time.
Yes. Right. Well, there may be a time as the authority is stood up that there may be a time where where they both function with the idea that the RTP sunsets as the authority replaces it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I think I would be remiss not to express that. What's the timeline we're envisioning for that possible overlap and full transition? As I want to plan my life.
Oh, yeah.
In this board, I want to know what's going to happen.
Right. And
Only about 80.
We've all worked in local government long enough that I do not have a calendar. When we've talked about it, we believe fall may be the opportunity to begin to talk to the governing boards about this, but the timeline will certainly be dependent upon the governing boards and the activities of the governing boards to move forward.
I guess that an important part of my question is, as soon as the governing bodies, city and county, show desire to approve that creation of the RTA, that's it. Right, there's no need for it to go back to the General Assembly and receive state support, or because if that's the case, then we're talking about perhaps late this year. But if it needs to go back to the General Assembly, it's next year. I don't know.
Oh, right, and that's an excellent question. And just to clarify, forming the authority with the city and the county does not require any activity from the General Assembly. That is a local decision that the governing boards can make.
Perfect.
I would love it if we could get that piece done this fall. I think you'll see a lot of goodwill at this meeting we're gonna have with joint meeting with the county and the city. The next trick though is going to be the funding piece. And that will end up having to go back to the General Assembly. I don't know if we'll have our ducks in a row to be able to make that application this coming General Assembly, or whether it's the following year, but that's the sort of time frame I think we're looking at.
We're talking a couple of years probably. My best guess would be a couple of years.
Assuming,
Yeah, because it is dependent on some work from the General Assembly, and often
it's also depending on larger electoral factors too.
exactly, then who's in charge in the General Assembly and how they feel about
And the
funding.
governor.
But to the question of when the RTP ceases to exist and the RTA becomes a full body, that is independent of that.
Yeah, we don't want to do away with the RTP until we have a functioning authority.
And there's some, Mr. Pruitt has a question.
Oh, yes, Mike. Mike, we can't hear you, dear. Can you turn your maybe your volume up, or?
I think I'm as loud as I can be. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So this might be premature, but I mean, the RTA is going to exist in a substantial capacity for quite a while before it's actually doing all the fun stuff that takes money. So when we're talking about potentially forming it up as early as this fall, in like a notional capacity. Are we going to start incurring any kind of costs either to the TJPDC for staffing or things that would require contributions from the locality? And I'm talking even things that are nominal that still might require some kind of vote from us.
Great question, and I'll turn to Christine, let Christine answer.
Yeah, since we will be sunsetting one and starting the other, we'll continue to use the existing funding that we're already receiving from the city and county for the RTP, for staffing for the RTA in the short term. It would then, the RTA would then need to be developing an annual budget to determine what they need, if they need to hire staff. And then the requests at that point would be coming back to get funding for anything additional to what we're receiving right now.
And I think you're hearing that there could be an overlap between, and so I think that gets to what Mike is asking, to be honest with you.
That's kind of what I'm driving at. If there's like a year of overlap, which I think is a foreseeably amount of time given the pace of local government, like does that require like extra like FTE equivalents for hours for y'all?
We don't believe so in the analysis that we've done, because we are now also getting a lot of staff support from Charlottesville and Albemarle. And so it's not only TJPDC staff that is working on this initiative.
For example, Ann and Dan.
Exactly.
Right. Great question though, Mike, thank you.
Some more information in the bylaws. The bylaws talk about officers, chairs and vice chairs, terms of office for the officers, a year. Talks about having regular meetings and special meetings, everything that you would imagine that an organization that has stood up would need in their bylaws. And we envisioned, our work group envisioned that at the onset we would need sort of two committees, a finance committee to talk about issues around budget and financial policies. Also a technical committee where we would bring in staff members from the localities and from DRPT, VDOT, to help review and comment as we talk about planning, projects, and programs, prioritization, all those things transit oriented. So the idea is this technical committee would provide information to the board of the RTA on which the board can make a decision. Additionally, the bylaws provide that there could be an executive director when the time comes. It talks about how you create the bylaws, how you amend the bylaws. There's even a provision within the bylaws for if an organization chooses to join and then chooses to step away.
So Ann, if once the authority is established, maybe not with funding, but just the authority, and we're working on the work of the authority to get to the point where maybe we have some funding, because we have to go to Richmond for funding.
We have to go to
We have to ask permission from Richmond. Having said that, the finance committee, technical committee, those points do not have to go back to Richmond for approval.
That is right.
Okay.
Everything that I just gone over in the bylaws is actions that can be done locally that do not require acts of the General Assembly. Changing the makeup of the group, changing revenue options, those would have to go back to the General Assembly. As we mentioned, we've done some engagement. We've hit the road. We've been to Richmond. We've been to the counties. Some of the information we learned is we heard a lot of interest from the localities about learning more about regional transit needs and ways to address those needs. We heard from the group that there was an understanding that some planning work really needed to be done before we could really explore dedicated revenue, right? We have to understand what the ask is. There were opportunities for some short-term improvements to services. DRPT, we had a very gracious welcome from DRPT. They were they spent 2.5 hours with us on a Friday afternoon. And they talked about demonstration as well as trip grants and the opportunity to apply for those grants. We heard across the board that the localities were very interested in Charlottesville and the county moving forward with setting up CARTA. The counties want to see how it goes. They want to see how it goes. But they did acknowledge that this region really needed a vehicle to tackle some of the hard decisions that were in front of us related to transit. Ben and Christine and Lucinda and I, we thought, we need to help the group understand what a kickoff for CARTA would look like. And apparently the wording's little. I see Christine squinting. I'm sorry, I thought I made that large enough. And we put that work back in those 4 buckets that we talked about earlier. Generally, the CARTA board would need to be appointed. Governing boards would need to appoint the CARTA board. The board would need to approve the bylaws, elect a chair and a vice chair, and designate committees. The CARTA board would need to continue to outreach. That outreach has been really valuable to the localities, to the partner agencies, and so it would be very important to continue that outreach. We heard from those counties, come back and talk to us. Let us know how things are going. Let us know where you are. So that would be under general activities of the CARTA board. Planning-wise, it's an opportunity to talk about setting regional transit goals, considering improvements in transit services, and as well as customer service. Funding, this goes to Mr. Pruitt's question. Once CARTA is formed, we would need to prepare a budget. We would need to evaluate staff and funding requirements, look at grant applications that might be for service expansions and enhancements that might be available, and then begin to talk about what revenue might look like. What kind of revenue, when's the right time to pursue revenue. And finally, as it relates to our state and federal partners, continue to advocate for the transit needs of our region, continue to recommend and talk with those federal and state partners about priorities, explore grants, and then possibly, as we go forward, begin to develop a set of legislative updates that CARTA might want to explore with the General Assembly to fine-tune this legislation that was approved in 2009.
And I don't want to speak for Brian but I do think that when we've talked in the past about this, some of this is getting to where we think it's going to take more than one General Assembly session and maybe more than 1 year, because there's a lot to do, and a lot of it is dependent on the General Assembly, and we have to be prepared to go to them with the right ask. And I think that gets to your question. Yeah.
But we're getting closer.
Yeah. We're closer than we were 4 years ago.
And just a couple of things to point out. The RTP, the move to create the RTP, as I acknowledged at the beginning, was an important move. And it was acknowledged back in 2016, 2017, when the RTP was created, that it was intended to be a precursor to a regional transit authority. The idea was to begin to get people around the table, to regionally talk about transit needs. That was an important move. At this point, we're to a point where the General Assembly, as well as localities that are not yet buying in, also want to see a transit authority get some traction. They want to see the authority do some work related to transit to ensure that before they broadly expand authority, broadly provide for revenue, that the transit authority is ready to tackle some of these tough issues. I have a couple of key takeaways on this slide, and then one more slide after that, and that is just that we all know that this region has some really interesting transit needs to both urban and rural areas, and this region is served by multiple transit partners. Investment in transit is warranted because localities seek improvement, and they seek improvements in quality of life. Transit's important. For more than 15 years, this community has talked about what does regional transit governance look like. We've talked about RTP sort of being the beginning, and we're to a point where we're evolving RTP to an RTA. That's hard to say, but that's, CARTA, standing up CARTA can serve as a venue for decisions about transit needs and service provision, and it can be the first big step to talking about solving those regional transit needs. That legislation, while not perfect, possesses sort of the fundamentals that are needed to create this regional transit authority. And then finally, our group would just recommend that the Regional Transit Partnership endorse the creation of the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority. That's what I have. Yes, sir.
Hi. So, I will start by saying that I'm very supportive of it. If I'm asking questions, it's because I want to understand the situation, not because I'm skeptical. But I want to say that if you had to point out what are the main differences in the abilities of that authority with respect to the RTP, immediately, like when creating the authority, but before the authority having budget capacities to secure revenue in innovative ways, let's put it like that. When in the initial steps of the authority, what are the key differences that it will have with respect to the RTP? Because the RTP was also a forum for discussion, planning, studying, debating, whatever. Like when you create authority in the initial steps, what changes?
Right, I think that's a great question. I'm going to kick off and then I'm going to look at Christine and Lucinda to join as well. I think that partnership brings people to the table voluntarily. Authority gives people a designated seat at the table to really talk about transit. What is not in here, I'll be real frank, is anything related to direct oversight over transit agencies. That is not in here. That is where at times the discussion of authority has gotten off track. We believe that, and we chatted a little bit about this at the last meeting, that the intent of this is to create, these are Christine's words, to create an authority with a little a, meaning people sit around the table, we collectively make decisions about transit, we create a shared vision that we then can go to the General Assembly to ask for support to raise revenue to fund transit. I think in the end, we're not going to see a 180, 150, whatever that. Clearly, technology, is not my forte. We're not going to see a drastic change. But it does provide credibility and provide. I don't know, Christine, is that the right word?
It'll be a fiscal body.
Right, a fiscal body to really help to make transit decisions. And I would say it's an evolutionary move.
I understand. Thanks so much.
Oh, sure. Thank you for the questions. Great questions.
I'm going to answer my second question within that one. So.
Oh, okay, awesome. I'll check that one off. Okay.
Mr. Pruitt has a
Mike, go ahead.
I think I might have asked this before, but am I correct in understanding that the RTA would have the ability to assume independent debt of the localities?
Yeah, and Mr. Pruitt, we are working through with city and county legal attorneys' offices the final edits and changes on those bylaws. So I don't want to say, I'm not an attorney, so I will not give you a legal opinion on that one, okay? But
I mean, my hope would be that we would be able to do like the ACRJ or the Urbana or, something that can go do stuff.
Right.
I think for me, some of the early questions that we'll have, where does CAT reside? Does it stay with the city as it is now? I probably will be, but how would that relationship work between CAT and an authority? Those sorts of things I think are what, maybe the RTA, all that they do is they just make sort of high-level decisions about policy or whatever and become a funnel for money or a way to get additional funding opportunities, and CAT continues to do its own thing. Anyway, I think a lot of those things, to your point, will have to be worked out with the elected officials and the people that are on the RTA.
And that's what's going to take some time to figure all of that out.
Right.
And some of it needs General Assembly permission, some of it doesn't. But it certainly is true in our community. We have existing authorities in the city and in the county, and they can take on debt themselves without impacting the debt in the city and the county, respectively. We don't know where we're going to end up with this authority. But we do know that transit is not inexpensive.
Correct.
And we can't keep paying for our transit out of our operational funds if we expect to really have a robust transit system. So we have to do something. Mike?
I was just gonna say, I mentioned this because, I mean, that was kind of my exact thought. If there was some kind of legal disability imposed on the RTA by the enabling legislation, that would be a big issue, because like such a big advantage that we get from our other authorities, our service authorities, our jail authority, is that we can do these major kind of capital improvement plans without carrying them on our books. And I think we can all agree that we're a bunch of pro transit nerds. We want to see some serious, like, generational capital investment in transit, and I can't do that while staying under 10% in Albemarle, you know.
That's right. Mike, we have Mike Murphy.
So many
We have a couple of
Mikes,
Mikes, but.
I will say that, going into February, I asked some questions and was told about little A's and big A's, and I asked about them in June. And this still reads like big A to me.
Okay, that's fair.
And when we have elected officials from both places talking about taking control of the operations, or I heard Mr. Pruitt say something about when does the fun part come when we take the money, right? Or Mr. Pinkston referenced, will the RTA run CAT and therefore JAUNT? When we're responding to a board and stockholders and jurisdictions who will not be part of the RTA, that's pretty complex. It's a big hairy audacious, whatever those.
BHAG.
Yeah, BHAGs, right? And so I remain curious about how you bring these, the idea about having CARTA forward to a joint meeting with council and the board, to stand something up when the long-term vision and charge is not clearly defined. And when I see things even in the 25-26 plan about applying for grants, is that imagining that CARTA would ask for DRPT money instead of JAUNT? Or is that about some other kind of grant? There are many questions that this raises that are not, years away in the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's grant applications due to DRPT in less than 6 months, right? So, in theory, CARTA exists by then. Do you imagine that you would be asking for all the legal dollars? So, right, like, there are things like that that have real operational impacts that make it problematic for me to imagine how you're going to stand the thing up before you say this is where we're headed.
And that's fair, Mike. I really appreciate that. That's fair. Garland, looks like you have something.
Yeah, I just want to say there are a number of models that are out there. What we've all looked at, I assume, is the majority of the Virginia model. But there are models all across the country that allow for the big entity to collect the money and buy services from the small organizations. That is one way to do it without touching, and that does create a little A. Because the authority then at that point controls, is a partner because they're spending their money to get the additional services that they want without having to collapse. But eventually, I assume we all know that the region will function better if the organizations, because we're sharing resources at that point in time, somewhere down the line. Because I think what, I won't speak for Mike, maybe I will. We're all struggling to get and retain drivers, right? And we can see, I would say Scott too, we're all in that bucket where we're trying to keep what we got, incentivize them to stay, and that number continues to ratchet up, and it has an impact on every single jurisdiction here. Because that cost continues to go up. Our ATU member over here, he likes that because, I mean, the drivers can pay more. But what I would say is, the more resources we can share, the more the better coverage model we can provide, and the more frequency we can provide, and shore up holes in our system. And we can be like that 1-2 punch in getting the system that we really want. But that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't negate the fact that the first step is to get CARTA established. Right? That little A, big A, whatever you want to call it. Get the money, you can make a decision after you get the money about how you distribute it. Because then there's a real, I'm just gonna say from my perspective, I have never seen the General Assembly approve something the first year we go to the meeting.
Right, and that's what Brian and I were alluding to. We're thinking it may take 2.
I mean, GRTC, when they went, it was almost, I think it was 3 years. So.
And that's a transportation authority.
That's correct. So it took a while to get it. And they were lobbying in Richmond.
For Richmond.
Yes, well in advance.
This is, to some degree, I guess, I think, Mike, your point is good. I will say it is a little chicken and eggish, just because I'm not sure we can make all the decisions that rightfully you're pointing out are going to have to be assessed until we have a little more information, until we get, clear at the level of the 2 jurisdictions, those 2 boards and councils, that, we really want to do this, and these are some of the things that might be entailed by that, but I think it will be of necessity somewhat open-ended, and I would say modest in terms of what we want to do in the first couple of years, just because by necessity, we don't want to break something that's working. And I don't know enough about if I had Ben Chambers behind me, I just asked him what he thinks.
He's not here today.
On this wall. Again, please don't take any of this to the bank or any other place. My sense is that JAUNT is a different kind of beast, and the work that you do and the things that you do and the structure that you have in terms of your stock ownership, and you're your own little authority, you're your own corporation, as I understand it. I would think like trying to take over what you do, not to use a military metaphor, but to sort of like fully integrate what you're doing within the larger effort, I think that would be a really long conversation, because what you do is so specialized and unique, and then the way you're governed is so unique. So I would think that's just Brian, he's not an expert, but that's just my sense.
I would just add, you are a known quantity in this community. People have a lot of faith and trust in you. We want you to be a part of this. We're not, and how that plays out, we don't know. But we certainly would like you under that umbrella, but we don't know how that's going to work right now. Okay, to figure out how to do it, right?
And your own board would have to agree.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think that while my example is JAUNT specific, and I do right now sit in the seat that is JAUNT, I'm also taking the perspective of 25 years in local government, right? And one of the things I pointed out in February is, you don't want to predispose people in the initial conversations in a way where thinking about the dollars and the impact on the general fund causes them to think that this is a poor idea, right? And so part of what I think isn't totally articulated and thought out isn't about, A's that are big or little and what it means to CAT or JAUNT or any other provider out there. It is, there are many different kinds of funding streams that, when we got that first draft, I said, you You're gonna put a public report out there that says what happens when we take 10 cents of a thing? I mean, you know, you'll kill it before anybody has a discussion about it. But when we start talking about these averages that are in the report that got posted on the website, right? You know, that imagines it as new dollars. You know, have we talked in the room at all about what's the communication strategy for board and council and for the public to hear? Because I think board and council have heard a lot about this. You know, the city and county are already investing over $15 million a year in transit now. So is this new money on top of that, you know, because it's written that way? You know, I don't know that I've ever heard that discussion, but maybe it happened before January when I was here, right? So, and I'm not part of the small group and I don't need to be. I'm just curious about, you know, what would the presentation say if one of your counterparts asks that on the 17th?
Asks what exactly?
What about the investments we already make that are, you know, minimum, what, just under $7 million in Albemarle County, about the same in the city for this year, but that's kind of camouflaged with federal funds from ARPA, CARES, et cetera. You know, it'd be more than $10 million in local dollars.
Yeah, I guess I would say that there would just need to be a realization that, you know, we're gonna have to just be, this isn't a good answer for you, but there's just gonna have to be a level, a sort of, I'll use the phrase, open-mindedness or curiosity or imagination about what those things could look like. In some of this, I think we're gonna have to like have this conversation in public with, and it's going to be because open meeting requirements and because it's the right thing to do, it's going to be like we're going in you know, you'll make a list, frankly, of the things you think we should talk about, but we are going to have those conversations publicly, I think, as that group, to be able to even to take the next step.
It seems like maybe we have to have the group established to have these discussions.
And I'm talking about even the meeting with the joint.
The joint meeting, yeah. So it gets back to that chicken and the egg though, isn't it?
I will say this, I think there's more, at least in the city, there's more appetite to do bigger things and spend more money on transit than there has been ever. And thank you.
And I would say that's true. Certainly when we look at our urban breakdown, we're very different because we have the rural area and we have the urban area. And I would think that's true to some degree for us as well. And I think Mike made comments that sort of support that as well.
I said it tongue in cheek, thank you, but I think the realization is council stepped up last year in their strategic plan and identified transit as one of their 9 major categories that they're going to focus on. And they're starting to chip away at that. So
and I would see investments that are, you know, maybe they go as before, or maybe they're redirected or reimagined. I don't know, but.
Right. But I mean, that's a conversation for the larger group to have. How to continue your focus in that, how does that go into the larger CARTA? And I assume the larger CARTA, because what you're doing really folds into the effect of the studies that TJPDC has done.
Right.
So you're making the infrastructure improvements, you're putting more, giving us more drivers so we can actually increase frequencies. Those are all things that are already noted in all of our plans. So I don't think it's,
I don't think there's anything that's like counter.
No, at all. I think this allows us to put more wind in our sails and actually really do larger
Can someone help me remember what the governance study recommended in terms of the model we would go with?
The governance study is very specific to go ahead and activate CARTA through the legislation that was approved.
But in terms of whether, yeah, I appreciate that, but in terms of whether, you know, CAT, for example, becomes a part of, it
did not. And what the governance study did, it's actually a really good read for, is it identified communities that were similar, and it talked about all these different models.
Yeah.
But the governance study never weighed in, and I don't think we have never had a conversation about what is the right model for transit service provision. The idea of CARTA was really to focus on broader long range. What's the vision for transit? How do we need to, how do we need to execute and deliver upon a vision? Not necessarily who's going to provide those services, but how do we achieve the vision? And to be frank, the missing link was revenue. And part of that goes back to that 2022 vision study that was done that talked about this broad vision as well as this constrained vision, where many people, Christine can speak to it, really talked about the need to expand transit and the availability of transit in this community.
I will think it will, when these conversations start to happen more, say when CARTA is stood up, just naturally there'll become a lot of conversations about what is the best model.
Right.
Because you're going to need to have a sense of that before you have a sense of the funding or anything
Right,
else.
and that may be one of those, some months after CARTA stands up, if CARTA stands up and the board is appointed, beginning to talk about what's our preferred model, right? What's our preferred model? What does that look like? How do we get there? What does that all look like? But now, when we talked about, when the work team talked about it, we did not tackle that preferred model. And I want to say that to Mike. There's been no conversation about the specific service delivery as much as it is about doing what the study says, and that is enabling this legislation, enacting this legislation.
And the novel might end up being
Activating
something
it.
that none of us have even
Correct.
thought about right now. Who knows?
I will say is that it's.
And I don't want to close the door right now on anything.
And I would say that, part of the work that Ann and, Lucinda, Christine and Ben have been doing is an iterative process. So we will really be thinking about putting this together. What CARTA looks like today when we stand it up may look totally different in 10 years because it evolves and it's supposed to. So I think the fear of getting out there shouldn't stop us, because I think that there is a push from this region to do more service collectively and make it better for all folks to use the service in this area.
And if the proof in the pudding of that, Garland, is you look at how our microcat has been accepted in Albemarle County. People are hungry for transit and I want to get back, Peter, you had your
So it's just so fast stuff. So when you come back on the 17th, you're going to be talking to people who haven't been following this as closely as this group has followed it, really. And I think this last piece is something that's really important and people are really going to be interested in. So I would suggest within the presentation, including two things. Number one is like talking about the implications for funding sources, right? Like we have no idea where funding would go, but this does open new spigots of funding coming in. So that's one thing. And it's a reasonable thing to ask. Will the county have to spend more? Will the county not have to spend any more money? Great questions. And there may not actually be answers, but those are going to be obvious questions. And the other one is to just, we had a whole bunch of discussion about when the timings of stuff is, like laying that out within the presentation, like, hey, we're gonna go to the General Assembly, they'll probably say, don't have time for you, you're not on the agenda, we'll come back in 2026, et cetera. Like another obvious question that I think people will ask.
And I think it's fair to say, we all know, because we live in that world, it's going to be dependent on the flavor of the General Assembly too. I mean, it is what it is, right?
I might not put that on a slide, but yes.
But we know that's true, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
I should add that, the final report, one of the action items, in addition to standing up CARTA, is to have a rural transit needs assessment.
That's right.
We have completed
You've done that, yes.
since then, and of course it does call for lots more availability, frequency, etc., hours of the day, days of the week, of course, and so at the point where the outlying or the rural jurisdictions would consider becoming a part of the entity, it could be a real game changer for the kinds of activities that their residents clearly want, but are not available now because of the current budget constraints. And just one tiny point I would say, in the version of bylaws that was sent out, when I read them on Adobe, I see all Ben Chambers' comments. You probably want to not do that out in the public, but I would say that his last comment is something I would have brought today, which is, it reads like the two members of council and board can bind their elected bodies to a budget decision. And Ben wisely points out that I don't know that two people can do this for their whole body.
No.
So I would look at that from a language perspective, because it still reads that way to me. And of course, don't send it out with comments.
Yeah, you were not intended to see the comments, and so we'll make sure that you don't.
Yeah,
I have
everybody's
super.
Okay. We drafted the bylaws, but the reality is, it's the CARTA that will approve those bylaws.
Yeah.
But thank you for that point.
And it's also still in legal review.
Right.
Yeah, the attorneys still have that, right?
Yeah.
So, but Mike, I really appreciate your comments and your thoughts, because you really are getting to the practical, and that has to be considered, you know, what am I doing with my budget over the next couple of years? And that's really, I mean, I know we all appreciate that.
Yeah, and who pays us?
Yeah.
Who do we go to for, our ask?
Yeah. So we need to circle back around maybe though, Mike, you have the rural assessment study, the needs study. And we've talked about that study, but it's not been really presented here.
It wasn't done yet, yes.
It's on the slate to be coming up.
I was gonna say, my thought was that I just was gonna follow that up. I said, we need to get that on the agenda, because that would be a good topic, an agenda item for us now that it's completed. And maybe, I don't know if we can, but we could look at maybe September for that. That would be a great agenda item.
Is that when it's
He's
scheduled?
shaking his head no.
Is it scheduled in September?
October.
Oh, well, that's fine. October's fine. No, it's not in October.
I'm out of the country in September, and so I talked to Lucinda about, and then.
We're so sorry that you.
Yeah, I know, it's so hard. Yeah, but Sam has asked me to come on the next Champagne trip, which is coinciding with this. And then November is, Thanksgiving, and December is Christmas, so like, I don't know when the ideal spot is, but I do think it's really important.
Yeah, it is important.
And we are, what I would call like at the 98% completion on our microtransit study, which has an implementation recommendation. We have several things we'd like to bring to this group.
That's great.
If it's still a group.
All right, so when you're out of the country, you could present it to us by Zoom. Just like.
Do you have a thing against my marriage then?
I like your mother. It's okay.
So there is a recommendation.
So we have to get to, and it is, our time is running out. This is a great conversation, this is really good. So the recommendation is today that the Regional Transit Partnership endorse the creation of the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority. And we would be endorsing that creation, right? We don't have all the details, we don't have all the answers, but that's what will lead us down the road to getting the authority established so that we can start working on the details. And so that's the ask for our meeting today. And then we can go into the meeting, the joint meeting, to be honest with you, Ann, and say to the city and the county and UVA, we have endorsed, the Regional Transit Partnership has endorsed this, right? And you and Ben are gonna do a presentation at that meeting.
I think we're working on the agenda, but I think that is the.
That was my understanding, was you were gonna
Yes,
do
ma'am.
a presentation.
I guess I am.
So would you, at this point, entertain the motion?
Yes,
Along these
that'd be wonderful.
lines? I move that this board recommend the regional, I move that this board endorse the creation of the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mike has seconded it. So, Lucinda, would you call for the vote?
Yes. Mr. Pinkston,
Yes.
Ms. Oshrin,
Yes.
Ms. McKeel,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt.
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. De Campo Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Silsdorf.
Yes.
Great.
Awesome, thank you all.
We can say it was unanimous.
There you go. Thank you all
It's
very
all
much.
good. Thank you. And with that, I'm conscious of our time as always. And so unless there are any comments or questions that folks want to ask, we can move to our Charlottesville Area Alliance Walk Audit, which is our next item on the agenda.
Do you want to do that, or do you want to punt to stay on track? Because
Well, we were running about 20.
no, I don't mind being punt. I'm always the one with the like dog and pony show that's just fun candy, so I can be punted again.
If you don't mind, that would be great.
Punt.
Because I think people really like the provider updates.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
Go for it.
So we'll put that onto the next agenda. You're kind.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
All right. So transit provider updates. Albemarle County Public Schools, Jamie Geller is not here today because they're starting school. And she said there is no way that I can be out of the office, today with school starting, and you get that. She called and said, I apologize, Diana, but she said, I will be sure to be at the next one. So we don't have, and she said, I can't even let my designee go because she said, we're just crunched.
I saw in the news that they actually have all the bus drivers.
Yes, they do. They're excited. Now, as you know, next month they'll be down one or two because
Yeah,
that's
but
the
still,
way
they're
the
starting the
world
school
works.
year.
But they're starting the school year fully staffed, which is great.
We are not, but we got everything covered. We have 18 runs, 18 routes, all of them have been covered, and we don't have anyone on our wait list.
So if Scott doesn't mind, I'm gonna let Garland go next because he's already started with his.
I was gonna say, that's a perfect
So
segue.
go right
There you
ahead.
So on the pupil side, first time since I've been here, we started the school year, there was no one on our wait list. So we've put all the kids that were requested service through the school year, all have a bus. First time. My team is doing a yeoman's job over there, and it's been rough. We've had some folks out because our numbers are always low when people are out. That puts pressure, and we've actually had to loan some of the transit drivers to people to cover some of those gaps. On the transit side, though, the next trip to Champaign has been locked in. Mike is going, I think I word to Scott.
I'm going, Colette is
Oh, that's
going.
great.
Christine's going.
So definitely no October meeting.
Right, we'll be canceling the October
Last
meeting,
year's
folks,
going.
just saying. Yeah.
We wanted to try to move, but we got and we're still waiting on confirmation from county manager about who on the county side is going.
Jeff's going.
Jeff's
going, and
County
Jamie
exec
is,
is going.
and Jeff is going, Jamie's going from Albemarle County Public Schools.
Oh, okay.
So Matt designated her to go. So we're,
That is great.
yeah.
Breaking news today.
Yes.
Wonderful, so, just so highlight, it's a quick 36 hours basically on the ground. We fly in, you basically have dinner, and depending on what time you get there. The next day is, all the activities are the next day. There's a meeting with the organization, MTD. It's a talking session, a couple of hours. Then we do a tour of their facilities, and then they finish up at their facility with their presentation. It breaks down the numbers. And then the next morning we fly out because of the way it is. We leave early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. But we have to be there by 4:30 to get to TSA. And then we're back on the plane. So it is really quick, but it is a really impactful trip. They are doing some really wonderful and innovative things there. The technology that we've been talking about is real. They are making it work. They are teaching transit agencies like ourselves around the country how they're making it work. And they're actually adding to their numbers based on the presentation they provided us.
Right.
So they're gonna go from 12 to 90 buses over the next 3 years.
And you might just quickly explain to people what they are actually using, so.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
hydrogen.
Yeah.
So
Hydrogen cells.
they decided not to do any battery electric until the battery length expands. That was their concern. And since they've been using hydrogen, it's one fill up, they go all day, fill up the next day. So it's basically like filling up on a diesel bus. That there was concerns, and he said he's heard a lot of concerns about the safety aspect. He said, but hydrogen is so light and it goes up, so
It's
it goes
safer.
away.
Safer than.
And it's actually
diesel
safer than
and gas.
gas.
Just don't put it in the Zeppelin.
That's right, as long as you don't, but that, what was burning was the cover of the.
That's right, it was the cover that was burning, it actually wasn't the hydrogen yourself.
But the fascinating thing is that they're making their own hydrogen.
They are
And
making
they
their
are
own.
using solar to make it.
They're using, so.
Oh,
they're
big, I
augmenting-
stand corrected.
Yeah, they're augmenting their use with the solar.
Yeah.
But the thing he said then is, because they're expanding, they won't be able to do, they're gonna add more, but the electrolyzer, is running at full capacity to do about 12 to 15 buses, and they're gonna move to 90, so they're gonna increase their storage and truck it in. Did I have that right?
Because of the.
I think it was
because of the
14
increase.
buses, but yes, they have to increase their storage.
Because of the increase.
Right, and they would do that, I think, with trucking in.
Trucking in some, but they have been making it up.
They're right, that's correct.
And Ann and I went and just found it absolutely, I was sold when I came.
It's a
home.
great
I mean,
trip.
it is just a really, it's a wonderful trip. I'm glad everybody, I think you're taking 22 people or something like that.
We're taking 22.
And just as a side, it is a good model for a regional system.
Right.
Two cities, a university, they provide transportation for middle school and high school students. It's an awesome system.
It is wonderful. And their university is 55,000.
Right.
Which is a much bigger system than UVA.
It's a great.
They've been doing this, and this is just not the first year they've done this.
Right.
They have a track record.
Yes.
Now, Illinois is flat as a pancake, though, okay?
It is, yeah, and no litter, but that's a whole different topic. But really great, so I'm thrilled that folks are able to go, and it's really exciting. And at some point, maybe we can get them back and have a presentation here with some of the.
So we actually potentially gonna have a presentation on the 17th.
17th, that's right.
About the Illinois trip.
Right.
But I have actually talked to Carl about taking the show on the road and coming here.
Oh, that'd be great.
Carl's awesome.
That'd be great.
So it's a matter of when we go back there, we can figure out timing.
When he could come.
When he could go. I think it'd be helpful for this community to hear.
Tell him he'd love our vineyards.
We'll put him on a bus, we'll take him on a bus.
Our champagne.
But really great, it's really exciting that that many people are getting to go. All right, so what else do you have then, Barbara?
That's it.
Oh, okay, all right. Getting back to UTS, Scott.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can compete with that, I'm so excited. All right, and I missed the last meeting, I think Allison was here for me, I believe, and so.
I think that's right.
Since that time, I think it's, I don't know, it's public knowledge, we had applied, I'd announced that we had applied for an FTA grant, we were not successful getting the no-low funding. So we're sort of in a regroup and look at where we are. I think, did you come, did Kendall invite folks to see, we had a mini transit bus, did anybody go?
I did not come, but my team did.
Okay, so we had a really, anybody see it? I mean, a little cute little bus called an E-Just, zero emission battery electric bus. It's a low floor. It's 20 feet long, so it fits in a parking space, but it can carry up to 20 people on it.
As long as they're good friends.
Some standing, yes. So we had, because we finally got our DC chargers fully installed and functioning, we were able to keep it on grounds for 2 weeks. And so it was we put it through its paces. I've had my team looking at, okay, how would we use it? And the mission really is, you've probably all seen it, UTS at times, you know, off-peak periods, late at night, et cetera. We don't need to be driving a 35-foot diesel bus with 5 people on it. That would be a nice supplement to be able to flip this out and to use the smaller vehicle. So we're close to making an order. We're not there yet, but we're close to making an order for a sample size, I'll say, of those mini transit buses. So you may see them later this fall.
And can I just put a little thought in?
Sure.
So one of the areas that we need transit, or have needed transit, is Old Ivy Road.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is we have 2 railroad bridges that the buses can't get under. So something like that could serve our Old Ivy Road developments.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That was exactly the use case for them. So
Oh, great.
one of my, I've got about 5 routes that I'd say we could use it for this, we could use it for that. And Old Ivy, the fact that we've got 2420 Old Ivy, which is that beautiful building, multi-purpose, and then across from it, the orthopedic center.
Right.
And yet they're literally within view of each other, but
Can't get it.
yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah,
So-
because, and of course, Old Ivy Road has those 2 railroad bridges, which,
Yep.
and the big buses can't. So
Yep.
that'd be great, and we have that, all that new housing going up over there. That's
Yes.
just, thank you.
So that was one. I'm actually going to Philadelphia next. Is anybody else going to the Zero Emission Bus Conference?
I'm sending my team.
Okay, so good. Yeah, we missed our lunch lately, but Allison, myself, and one of our junior staff members are going to go to Philadelphia Zero Emission Bus Conference, which they've been putting on for a number of years, 4 or 5, more than 6. This is the first time I've ever gone, so excited to go there and learn more. I've signed up for the 101 course. Is an extra fee the first day, but to get the basics. And then the last update I'll have is just to kind of in the theme of we are thankfully fully staffed and looking good for all of our services and operations. Oh, the other one is we're not quite there 100% yet, but we're rolling out some technological enhancements. We've done the update with Transload. We've got new hardware on our buses. Hopefully they'll actually start to show capacity later this semester. Now you can track it on Transload, but we'll actually say, frowny face, happy face, or meh, for whether you're standing or not on the buses, which will be great for the students. And then also new passenger counters. So lots of little tweaks and enhancements and maybe some exciting new types of vehicles.
That's great, that's cool. I like hearing the small one. That's great. Mike, update from John.
Oh, I was just gonna tell you about my trip. I hugged for bed, all kinds of stuff.
We'll do that over a happy hour.
All right. Let's see, last week, I was asked to present to the Disability Commission of the General Assembly to talk about paratransit. I did a bit of coordination with DRPT ahead of time after I had created my presentation. Former city county person, Amy Lawfer is chairing the commission right now. They did make a consensus vote while I was there to take several of our recommendations forward at the end of the year for study by DRPT and budget impact, which is good. We had a conference in town just since we've been here at CTAB. And for us, there are a couple of opportunities in the software realm that are really interesting and some free things that are out there. One is, of course, a big picture planning in Remix, which everybody can access for free. But the other is through our insurance provider, we could add an incredible amount of tracking and functionality that doesn't exist today, totally free as well, because they think it drives safer driving behaviors from the operators.
Interesting.
So that's really exciting. I did mention before, we have completed the rural transit needs assessment, which is great. Certainly calls for lots more of the same, and some new things. We're really close on finalizing the micro transit study. I've been torturing Garland's friend Randy Farwell for quite a long time now with changes. And I will say that there are some really interesting impacts for us to pilot microtransit, I hope, within the next 12 months. Because there's a really sound case for it articulated in the study. I think it's also practical and operationally doable, which is always a plus. I may have said before, I am less excited about what the battery electric vehicle implementation study that I inherited says, which is basically without a lot of in-route charging, and if you're not able to buy more buses than you have today, then you can only electrify about 26% of your fleet, right? And that tells you a bit about, what Champaign-Urbana is experiencing and going towards hydrogen, because the charge in the vehicles just won't do it.
Right,
And
exactly.
they're flat as a pancake, right? We are not, right? And so it's a lot different here. There's certainly a lot of action with the completion of all these studies for JAUNT. Other than that, we have a couple of business items coming up shortly. I need to train the board on FOIA because there's some changes, and of course, related to that there's a new take on what it means to participate remotely that we need to adopt new policy on, and maybe this group does as well, right?
This group will assume the policy that is approved by the commission, which will be sent to everybody by email and on the next agenda for review.
We just talked about that this afternoon.
All right.
So
You guys don't have to actually adopt it because you're advisory, not decision making, but you do have to follow the policy of the decision.
So we'll get that in our inbox for the next meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. So is that it, Mike?
Yes, ma'am.
So Garland and his friend are going to share their texts. I've been watching them text me back and forth. I'm fascinated with what all that, the expression on Garland's face has been interesting. I'm just teasing you there. All right, having said that, Katie from DRPT couldn't join us today. So we don't have a DRP report. But Brian, do you want to add anything? Because you were at the conference. Do you want to add anything to what Mike reported out?
I would say he did a great speech.
Yeah. There you go. Great speech. So tell us what your speech was.
Well, Lucinda asked me to step in, I guess, and talk about regional transit visioning, I guess. And I set up some time with not their executive director, but basically the chair of their board, the person who was putting on their conference, out of Blacksburg.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so just to get a sense of what would be helpful, they called it a keynote, which I thought was a little
Scary.
It's been scary, but a little ostentatious.
Yeah, well,
and
it's scary.
it was just basically what I did was I gave an update on the transit work that we've been doing here for a number of years, right after people ate their lunch. That's what I did.
But a lot of people from DRPT were there, so it was really nice for them to hear about the work that we're doing.
So is it a podcast or taped, or can
I took pictures of Brian speaking.
Well,
I can share
I'm
them.
interested in what he said. I can see what. But
Basically, I was just giving people a history of what we all have been working on a long time before I got involved, and what we hope to do in the future. And like I always try to do in those groups is lift people up that are in public service, because it's super important work and it's not, most lucrative, but it's super important, so.
He talked a lot about the work that this group has been doing.
Yeah.
Which was wonderful for that group to hear that this region is making transit a priority.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the effectiveness of his speech was that over time, collectively, the group can move the ball down the court. And I think that resonated with the group.
And the importance, I'm sure, of just getting together
Yeah.
and talking, because what I find is, or I have found over the years, is that the transit provider update, lots of those sharing of the updates in this room have been more impactful sometimes than some of the other items we've dealt with. It's just getting people around the table and listening and sharing information is critical.
They're very nice
that's
people.
great.
Yeah.
I wish you'd invited me, I'd come on.
I thought you would have.
But anyway, it's all good. I didn't say
I didn't know you weren't.
But it doesn't matter. It's all good. So I think we're done except for staff updates. So are there any staff updates?
Mr. Krebs had something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this will be fast. So the Piedmont Mobility Alliance, which is city, county, UVA, both hospitals, many different organizations, we're all about, regional collaboration, sort of disciplinary collaboration. We're taking it to the next notch next week by having a joint social with our counterparts from the Shenandoah Valley, which is the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. They also do pedestrian stuff, interestingly enough. And so that's going to be a tour of Waynesboro's new park, Thursday, August 29th. That's the type of thing I'd really say more to the policy board, but it's a little late to make that announcement on Wednesday. So next Thursday, August 29th in Sunset Park in Waynesboro. And the thing that I'm most excited about is in Waynesboro, their parks planner acts sort of like Chris Ginsick does here, where he does transportation planning too. He's going to talk about some of the connectivity work that Waynesboro is doing that's pretty cool, that will connect Waynesboro up to Shenandoah National Park and eventually the Three Notch Trail.
So is that
pretty
the
cool.
part that I think of as being downtown?
As you're driving down 250, down the long 250, it'll be sort of overhead on your right.
Okay.
There's a flyer about it.
Yeah,
great.
and
Thank
flyers
you.
by the door.
That's great.
Yep.
I'll pick one up.
Thank you.
That's great. And you did ask for that earlier, and I was about to forget. So
Yeah,
thank you
all
for
good.
remembering that.
Yeah.
Any other updates or other business? I don't have any other than to say, it does sound like for your calendars that we're not going to have a meeting in October, but we will have a September meeting. So our next meeting is September the 26th, 2024, same place, same time. And, Citado, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to share two thoughts that I thought is relevant to this meeting. So after asking the question of the difference between RTP and RTA, I was digesting what you said and thinking a little bit, and I thought that one thing that's important to remark as a difference, even though they might operate in very similar ways at the beginning, the RTP was, my understanding, always perceived as something temporary, a transition. So that adds to the lack of credibility, perhaps, in terms of how long it's going to last, right? The RTA, I believe, it's much more kind of long-term, like undetermined commitment, like how long it's going to last. So in a way, it's I think that that's something very important to think, and I like that. The other thing that I just want to share quickly is that for a moment, Mr. Houston, you mentioned that JAUNT operates somehow independently, and I just want to say something that I learned while being a JAUNT board member. JAUNT stands for Jefferson Area United Transportation, something like that. It was created by the TJPDC in the late 80s. So it was always created to be a
joint collaboration for transportation needs and etc. As a matter of fact, the shareholders of JAUNT are the city of Albemarle County and the surrounding county. So I find it, JAUNT is kind of very interesting organization, which in a way, you're right, it operates independently, but in a way, it just feels like by creation by the TGPC, by the shareholders being the city and the county mostly, like 2/3 of the shares are city and county. I think it's very important for it to be considered in that umbrella that we are having about cards. I just want to kind of share that. I understand in certain ways it's independent, but it also is something that's very pertinent to be a part here. So I just want to kind of share that.
Thank you. Excellent.
I just need to make a friendly amendment since, at some point we'll have to publicize that JAUNT turns 50 next year. And so it is actually the first, the beginnings of JAUNT is 1975. It's okay. 1987 is when we started doing the complimentary carriage.
We'll have to have cupcakes.
Sorry, I was in.
It's okay. I love it.
Okay, with that then, if there are no other comments or questions, I will adjourn us till September.
Great.
Thank
So,
you.
I feel like actually, maybe you could even comment on this. I feel like JAUNT was almost like set up to provide the transportation piece, the region and social services, right? Like,